How to give when you have nothing to give. As a poverty survivor, that's my term, just made it up, you have to read lots of books on motivation, positive mental attitude, how the mind works, and stuff like that. And as I read up all these books, I began to see a common theme emerge. It's as if all those rich positive gurus just read each other's stuff and regurgitated it in different terms and descriptions. That may have rolled off my tongue rather inelegantly, but it's not without a grain of truth. Anyway, among the many common themes was, you have to give to get. We've all heard that one, and maybe many more times than we care to count. It's a common refrain woven throughout the Bible, said 100 different ways, but the meaning is the same. You have to give to get. I read that one so much in all of its myriad forms that after a time I just glossed over it. Since I didn't have anything, that particular success principle didn't apply to me. That's the way I figured it, and that's all it could be. Poor people cannot give. We don't have anything. And once you begin to accrue stuff through hard, purposeful work, then you could give because you now have something to give. You can give a lot to charities, community undertakings, and many important causes when you have money and stuff to give. And I knew that was true because in most of the books I read, when the author began talking about their own personal experience, they talked of giving abundantly out of their abundance. So that settled it. I could start giving when I had something tangible to give. In the meantime, I'll just keep reading, learning, and preparing myself for opportunity. That's it. Or was it? Every book I read led to at least 2 more books to read because successful people always tell you what books they read, what books caught their attention one day and they got them and read them. And since I was in the process of molding and shaping my mind to become more like theirs, I'd take this passive recommendation and read their books of choice. But there was one book in my winding course of success that didn't come by the casual reference of some other author. This book, you might say, dropped from the sky, and it was one of the most influential books I've ever read, and the only one I've purchased and gave away as a gift to someone whom I thought could really benefit from it. The book's called The Education of Millionaires, written by a man named Michael Ellsberg. I came across a very brief live radio interview of Ellsberg by a national radio talk show host while I was flipping through the dial listening for something interesting. So the whole thing was quite incidental, what some might call luck or serendipity. You can call it what you like, but for sure things like that only hit you when you're looking for something. But that's a whole other topic for a whole other day. I liked Ellsberg's topic. He studied wealth in America and in particular wanted to know why so many academic underachievers, high school and college dropouts, went on to become fabulously wealthy, accomplished persons of note, many making more in a month than the most dedicated A student in college could aspire to make in an entire year after graduation. I too have always been bugged by this apparent paradox. If college is the key to economic success, as we've always been told, how are all these individuals able to slough it off and not only become successful in the economic sense, but prodigiously so? Why was that? Well, Ellsberg was determined to answer this question in the best way possible by going to a host of these multimillionaires and billionaire dropouts and asking them himself. You can't get any purer than that, I don't think. So he set a course and spent a couple of years interviewing as many of them as he can get to sit still long enough, and he wrote about each individual account in his book. And it was the book from the sky that became one of the most influential to me on my journey. Why? Well, that brings us back to giving. You see, Ellsberg wrote rather pointedly in his book about giving when you have nothing to give. He did not just gloss over this very important and effective principle or give it lots of platitudinous ink. He did not let the reader off the hook. He pounded home the point that you can give when you have nothing to give if you just got up off your mental ass and figured it out. I read and reread that particular portion of his book at least a dozen times, each time getting a little more irked. The way I saw it, he was now doing very well financially and piously waving his finger at the reader saying give. And whereas I glossed over all the other authors' screeds, I kept coming back to Ellsberg's because he really pounded this principle with vigor. Here I was sitting here in a local fast food eatery with no money, using a borrowed computer and free internet, and across the street in a Walmart where I was working nights as a stocker was a borrowed, rusted out minivan that I slept in for just a few hours in the morning until it just got too hot to sleep. Reading this Ellsberg guy telling me about giving. Imploring, demanding that I give, that I figure out a way to give. Unmitigated gall, right? Side note, in case you're questioning how I could buy books while being in such apparent destitution, the answer comes from an Indian woman I met many years before. She was a stay-at-home doctor mom and her husband was a surgeon, and while I was doing floor work in her home, we'd have conversation. She noticed my fascination with all those books in her husband's library, and she gave me what she said was an old Indian proverb which stated very succinctly, "Better shoeless than bookless." Since then, I've suffered many times through the indignity of having holes in my shoes in favor of buying a good book. Now, I'm not sure when it occurred, but I actually began giving some constructive thought to Ellsberg's entreaty. I began thinking, what could I possibly give? I don't have anything. Then I thought of it. I could write letters. I'm a good letter writer with a decent command of the English language. I could write an engaging and sometimes entertaining letter, something worth reading to the end. And with that, I found what I could give. So, whenever I received extraordinary customer service, I would sit down and draft a well thought out letter to that person's boss about my experience and send it. Simple. That was my contribution. Since then, I've written over 100 letters, all original, with an exact account of what happened during my memorable customer service event. Not a single one had a form letter feel. Over time, I've modified my approach to make it even more effective. For instance, I almost never send a letter to their immediate supervisor because I found through feedback that people who are too close tend to filter the letter negatively. So I ask for the person's boss's boss's boss or the owner, someone with no daily contact with the giver of excellent service because they're more inclined to take my sentiments at face value. I'm proud to say that my giving has resulted in everything from formal recognition to multiple perks to outright promotions. Some businesses have even sent me coupons and promo codes for discounts and perks. Giving when I had nothing to give also contributed to me expanding my contacts, so I have a growing list of people and businesses that are generally very accommodating when I ask for their assistance in helping me in some way with a business initiative. So it may sound corny, but I found a way to give when I didn't have anything to give. Now, here's an important point. If you think that my letters were the thing that I gave, then you're quite incorrect. I used to think it was the letters too. But it wasn't the letters, not at all. The letters were just a metaphor, a physical manifestation that could be examined, scrutinized, appreciated, and then filed away. The letters were the thing to focus on, but not the most valuable thing I gave. What I gave was my time, the most precious, guarded, and irreplaceable commodity any of us has to give. We all get the exact same amount, and it's entirely up to us how we want to expend it. I just chose to expend a portion of mine elevating individuals who, for a time, gave something valuable and worthwhile to me. So on this blog, periodically, I'll post some of those letters. Some are short, just a paragraph maybe, and some are extensive, like more than a page. But none of them are for bad service. It's been many years since I wrote a letter acknowledging spectacularly bad service. I don't do that anymore. Or even good service, which I gratefully acknowledge while I'm there. Only the truly memorable get the letter, as it ought to be. Object lesson: give your time. Even the poorest, most penniless among us can do something meaningful for someone. Even the most destitute have just as much time as the wealthiest, and each of them can give it as they so choose. This is Bo. Thanks for checking in. There's a lot more to come, so come back soon.